So in this presentation, we're going to talk about respiration part 2. Since we finished part 1, we identified the different organs of the respiratory system. We listed the characteristics that favor the exchange of gases at the level of the alveoli. In this presentation, we're going to study the reactions between hemoglobin and the respiratory gases, which are oxygen and carbon dioxide, and how to write the word equation and the chemical equation as well. Also, we're going to distinguish between the synthesis reaction and the assimilation one. In activity 4, transport of respiratory gases, we studied about the transportation of oxygen and carbon dioxide for the blood entering the lungs. It was poor in oxygen, that's why it has dark red color, whereas that leaving the lungs, it has bright red color since it's rich in oxygen. And we have diffusion of oxygen from the lungs to the blood, medium of high concentration of oxygen, which is the lungs, with a medium of low concentration of oxygen, which is the blood, and carbon dioxide is moving from the blood to the lungs, which is diffusion. We said that plasma, mostly water, it carries dissolved molecules and plasma proteins for clotting, whereas blood cells, they transport oxygen and carbon dioxide bound to the hemoglobin. There is no nucleus, they can't repair themselves, and they have a lifespan of about 120 days. Okay, so let's talk here about the white blood cells. White blood cells, they are called the immune cells, and the hematocrit, it represents the percentage by volume of red blood cells in blood. We talk about the red blood cells, they are disc-shaped, they are unnucleated, they are without a nucleus. They are 5 million red blood cells per millimeter cube. They contain a protein which is called hemoglobin, and they can bind to oxygen and carbon dioxide. Here are the new ideas today. How are the respiratory gases transported by hemoglobin? We have different forms of the transport of oxygen gas and those of the transport of the carbon dioxide gas. Let's start with oxygen. Oxygen gas is transported into two forms. Either oxyhemoglobin, HbO8, which represents 98% of oxygen, or in the form of oxygen dissolved in plasma, which represents 2%. Whereas carbon dioxide is transported into three forms. Either carbohemoglobin, HbCO2, which represents 20%, in the form of carbon dioxide dissolved in plasma, which represents 10%, or in the form of bicarbonate dissolved in plasma, which represents about 70%. Let's start with the reaction between oxygen and hemoglobin in blood. So please, these reactions, you have to study them. Okay? Whenever the medium is rich in oxygen, lungs, this is the medium that's rich in oxygen, hemoglobin can bind oxygen. So for oxygen plus hemoglobin, they can give oxyhemoglobin. This is the word equation. The chemical equation, 4O2 plus hemoglobin, Hb, can give HbO8. This is the word equation in the medium rich in oxygen, and the chemical equation in the medium rich in oxygen. While in the medium that's poor in oxygen, like the case of fishes, HbO8, oxyhemoglobin, will dissociate. Since we need oxygen, so HbO8 will dissociate to give oxygen. So the word oxyhemoglobin will give 4 oxygen plus hemoglobin. The chemical equation, HbO8, will give 4O2 plus Hb. General reaction between oxygen and hemoglobin. The word equation, 4 oxygen plus hemoglobin, can give oxyhemoglobin. It can move in this direction from the left to the right, move from 4 oxygen hemoglobin toward oxyhemoglobin whenever the medium is rich in O2. Whenever the medium poor in O2, it moves in the opposite direction since we need oxygen. So oxyhemoglobin will dissociate and will give oxygen and hemoglobin. The chemical equation, 4O2 plus Hb hemoglobin, in medium rich in O2 can give HbO8. And the medium poor in O2 will dissociate HbO8 to give 4O2 plus Hb. As you see here, this reaction occurs in both directions. So what do we call this reaction? It's called reversible, meaning that unstable. It can occur in both directions. If the medium is rich, it will move toward the oxyhemoglobin. If the medium is poor in oxygen, it moves toward the dissociation of oxyhemoglobin toward oxygen and hemoglobin. So where hemoglobin binds oxygen in the medium that's rich in oxygen and releases it, meaning that releases oxygen in the medium that's poor in oxygen. Moving to the reaction of carbon dioxide with hemoglobin in blood. Word equation, carbon dioxide plus hemoglobin, the medium that's rich in CO2, like the tissues, hemoglobin will bind to carbon dioxide to give carbohemoglobin. So CO2 plus Hb can give HbCO2, which is the carbohemoglobin. This is the word equation, and this is the chemical equation. In the medium that's poor in CO2, lungs, for example, HbCO2, the carbohemoglobin will dissociate to give CO2. So carbohemoglobin will dissociate to give carbon dioxide plus hemoglobin. So the chemical equation HbCO2 will give CO2 plus Hb. The overall or the general equation, carbon dioxide plus hemoglobin in a medium rich in CO2 can give carbohemoglobin, while carbohemoglobin in a medium poor in CO2 can give carbon dioxide plus hemoglobin. So the chemical equation is CO2 plus Hb can give HbCO2 in the medium rich in CO2, while they dissociate into CO2 plus Hb into the medium poor in CO2. And as you see here, this reaction is also occurring in both directions, so it's irreversible, where hemoglobin binds carbon dioxide in a medium rich in carbon dioxide and releases it in a medium poor in carbon dioxide. So this is the figure where the blood flows to the hemoglobin and the red cells bind oxygen, then hemoglobin and oxygen bind to form oxyhemoglobin. When the blood flows, very little oxygen in them, the oxyhemoglobin will break down and releases oxygen. The oxygen diffuses into the cells, and the hemoglobin in the red blood cells goes back to the lines to take more oxygen, and the cycle continues. Here, as a conclusion, gas exchange, we get oxygen by inhalation. So oxygen will bind hemoglobin to give oxyhemoglobin, HbO8, or it can be by Hb in red blood cells or free in plasma to reach the tissues. Whenever it's reached the tissues, we have release of CO2 in free in plasma or form of bicarbonate or form of carbohemoglobin move to the lungs. So by exhalation, we're going to release CO2 to the atmosphere. So this is a very important slide talking about the reaction of carbon monoxide. Carbon dioxide plus CO2, while carbon monoxide is CO. This reaction between carbon monoxide, it's a stable reaction. It's irreversible. It can't occur in both directions. So it prevents the binding of oxygen and carbon dioxide to hemoglobin. So less oxygen will be delivered to the body cell. So it can produce less energy, and carbon dioxide will accumulate in the tissues. This will lead to intoxication. So carbon monoxide that's present in smoke, especially in cigarettes, binds in an irreversible manner, in a stable manner, to hemoglobin and prevent the binding of oxygen and carbon dioxide. As such, less oxygen is delivered to the body cells, so they can produce less energy, and carbon dioxide will accumulate, leading to intoxication. This is the chemical equation. It occurs only in one direction, where carbon monoxide, bind to hemoglobin to give HbCO. Compare the aspect of the blood entering to that leaving and explain this change. The blood entering the lungs, we said, is dark red in color than in the blood leaving them, which has bright red color. Since blood entering the lungs is poor in oxygen, meaning that it's poor in oxyhemoglobin, while blood leaving the lungs, they are rich in oxygen, rich in oxyhemoglobin. Aspect of the blood entering the organs to that leaving the organs. Blood entering the organs is brighter red in color than that leaving the organs, which has dark red. Since entering the organs, blood is going to be rich in oxygen, meaning that we have oxyhemoglobin in abundant amount. While blood leaving the organs they uses the oxygen, so the blood leaving will be poor in oxygen, so it will be poor in oxyhemoglobin. Two types of circulation. We said that we have two types of circulation. The first type of circulation is called pulmonary circulation, and the second type is called systemic. Pulmonary was called small circulation. It's between the lungs and the heart. What's the aim of this circulation? It's to oxygenate the blood, meaning that to give blood oxygen and to get rid of CO2. This is the pulmonary circulation, or it's called the small circulation. Also, we have systemic circulation, or the general circulation. It's the circulation between the between the heart and all the body organs. What is the aim of this process or this circulation? It aims to transport oxygen and nutrients to the body cells and to drain away the carbon dioxide and waste. So systemic circulation between the heart and all the body organs, while this pulmonary circulation is between the lungs and the heart. The systemic circulation, it aims to transport oxygen and nutrients to the body cells and to drain away carbon dioxide and waste, while the aim of the pulmonary circulation is to oxygenate the blood and to get rid of carbon dioxide. This is the difference between pulmonary circulation and systemic circulation. So I repeat, pulmonary, it's small, so it's between the heart and the lungs. The aim of this is to oxygenate the blood and to get rid of CO2, whereas systemic circulation, it has the role of the transportation of oxygen and the nutrients toward the body cells and to drain away carbon dioxide and waste. Systemic, between the systems, between the heart and all the body organs. Oxidation reactions and the assimilation, or it's called synthesis reaction. Oxidation reaction, it uses oxygen and the nutrients, basically glucose, to produce energy. And waste, carbon dioxide gas, water vapor are released in this reaction. Assimilation is called the synthesis reaction. It's using nutrients and energy to produce or synthesize new organic molecules like proteins and carbohydrates. So you have to know the different types of reaction. You have to know what is the oxidation reaction, what is the assimilation or the synthesis one. You have to know the difference between the pulmonary circulation and the systemic circulation. You have to know the aspect blood entering the organ, blood leaving the organ, blood entering the lungs, blood leaving the lungs. You have to know the reaction between hemoglobin and the carbon monoxide. You have to know that it's irreversible, it's stable, it occurs in one direction. It leads to the accumulation of carbon dioxide, leading to intoxication, and less oxygen will be delivered to all the body cells. You have to know that the reaction between carbon dioxide and hemoglobin is reversible, it's unstable, and it occurs in both directions. And you have to study the word equation and the chemical equation. And you have to know the reaction between oxygen and hemoglobin, which is reversible, sorry, it's unstable. And you have to study the chemical equation and the word equation as well, in addition to the forms of transport of oxygen and carbon dioxide by hemoglobin.